Good evening. It's Friday again here in India, Friday evening again here in India. And we're back to have another conversation that matters. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is a little sensitive, maybe even a little contentious, because it's about women and how they relate to other women and the relationships we tend to form with other women. And I have with me Pearl Panthaki, who is a learning leader. She's a transformation coach. She's a wellness coach, and that's what her designation says. But let me tell you a little bit about this amazing person. Pearl is not just a brilliant coach. She is also somebody who's extremely passionate and extremely dedicated to empowering women, particularly women professionals, in living very empowered lives. Pearl is one of my best friends. She's what I jokingly say my official chanter because every time I go through a patch when I'm nervous or scared, I send Pearl a message saying, "Pearl, chant for me, please." And she always chants for me. So she is somebody who is very core to my functioning, to my everyday life, and to the path that I'm on. Pearl is also a very important pillar in Dragonflies Everywhere, which is a nonprofit that a bunch of us run and operate together. She coaches people from nonprofits at the who are beneficiaries of nonprofits at the grassroots as well. So Pearl, as you know, as you can see, has very diverse and deep experience with people from different aspects of life, different cultures, different countries, and I personally know Pearl as a person who has very healthy relationships. There's no gender involved in it. She's got great relationships with men, with women, with people in general. And this was a topic. Today's topic, what we're talking about how can women build trust-based relationships with each other, and how can we succeed because of these trust-based relationships. I struggled to find somebody who I thought would be a good fit to have this conversation with. And when I thought about it, I realized that I didn't have to look far. I just had to look within my own ecosystem because I have wonderful people like Pearl who are there and who are so integral to my circle, circle I lean into almost on a daily basis. So, welcome, Pearl.
Thank you so much, Reka. Lovely to be here, and thank you for that warm and generous introduction.
Yeah, I have to be nice to you because you have to keep chanting for me, right? You're like my official chanter, so I have to say
Getting
very
paid
nice
that
things
time now.
about you. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, Pearl, you know what? I'm not going to invite you to say anything about yourself personally because I think a lot of people
You've
already
done
know
a
who
great
you
job.
are. No, a lot of people know who you are. But I would like to invite you to share why do you think today's topic is a very important topic for us?
Thank you, Reka. I think that's such a great question. Uh, I think women are so powerful when they're together, when
Mm,
there's unity there.
mm,
But more often than not, you don't see women supporting one another, connecting, collaborating, whether it's in the
mm-hmm,
workspace or whether personally. And
mm-hmm.
I think when you are fortunate, I would say, like both of us, to have
Yeah,
friendships that
yeah,
are so deep and
yeah,
meaningful,
yeah,
I think there is that sense of comfort. There's that
yeah.
sense of I can reveal my true self. And I don't think so many women out there are fortunate enough to have such rich relationships. And I'm not talking about a whole load of relationships, but I think just to have one or two people who you can open up to, you can feel that there is no judgment. I think that is an incredible feeling.
Absolutely. No, I agree 200% with you because, as you say, I consider myself very, very blessed to have a circle of women who are so powerful. You're one of them. We have Suparna and we have Chinanchu, who's also in the
Yeah.
Dragonflies core team. And, I know I am a more powerful person on an everyday basis because of the women in my network. And but this is something that I've always struggled with, this to own this or to actually even articulate it,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of conversation about how women relate to each other and how women form relationships with each other. The conversation is actually very stereotyped, if you ask me, and it's not very positive. You know, we've all heard about this thing about, oh, women are each other's worst enemies, and we hear stuff like, we even hear women say, oh, I don't want to go on a women's alone trip. Imagine being in
Yes.
a space with women for 5 days. Oh my God, that's a recipe for disaster, right? We hear of labels like Queen Bee, the diva. Interestingly, today morning I was just telling you before we came on that I was yelled at by a lady for looking at a tree outside her house, and she kept screaming at me. And I was just like, "Hey, lady, I'm looking at your tree. I'm not doing
Yeah,
anything." And
absolutely.
she thought I was going to steal her plants for some bizarre reason, when I had no intentions of stealing anything. And while she was yelling at me, there was an older woman who was walking behind me who stepped up to say, no, she is not doing anything. She was just looking
Yeah.
at the tree. And for me, in that moment, there was this paradox. There was one woman who was screaming, and then there's one woman who is standing up and saying, no, she didn't do anything. And what
And
was
this other
interesting
lady
for
you didn't even know, right? She stood up
both,
for you
yeah,
and met
I did know both
strangers.
ladies. I did
Yeah,
know both ladies. Now here
yeah.
was the interesting thing. I saw two men walk out by on their morning walk, and they were sniggering, saying, oh, another cat fight. And I, immediately my head kind of put that label away, saying, cat fight. We don't hear about a similar label for men,
No,
right?
we don't, do
we do,
we?
we don't hear any of these stereotyping or judgment about the relationships men have with each other. So I want to kind of know, what is your immediate response when you, and I'm sure you've come across variants of this, so what is your immediate response when you come across a sentiment like this, and why do you think there is so much of focus and judgment on the way women relate to each other and the relationships that we form with each other?
So great question. You mentioned this word labeling. And I think as soon as we label anything, immediately it becomes very restrictive. And,
Mm,
labels can be very mindless. We can just say these labels just without thinking. And I think
yeah.
it causes unconscious weight uh,
Yes.
for the person maybe on the receiving end. And
Yeah.
that can be very hurtful and damaging, maybe for that moment,
Yeah.
maybe for a week, month, or maybe, something more permanent. And we
Yeah.
don't realize sometimes those labels can really define our behavior. And
Mm,
I think it's a tendency to undermine the potential of women.
mm,
I
mm.
really wonder, where do these labels come from? Like, who starts off this
That
terminology? How does
that
it spread?
that's
Right?
exactly my question. Why is there so much focus and judgment about women
Yeah.
and the way they relate to each other? Like, why do
Eh,
we always talk about the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, but why do we not talk about the positive relationships? Because
Abs-
we know there are so many of it.
of course, of course. And if you think of, something like a sisterhood, it's women together. It's an empowering term, right? And collectively, like I said at the beginning, I think women together can do more. There's power in unity, but is that ideal for everyone? Can
Yeah.
everyone live up to that ideal of being an equal, I would say? And,
Hmm.
I have a sister, a real sister, and
Yeah.
we're very close, but yet we fight. So when
Yeah.
sisters fight, you can just brush it off and you're fine, the next moment. But
Yeah.
are friends on that same wavelength?
Yeah.
Very few, unless you're really close friends. And, I think, you talked about queen bee.
Yeah.
When someone at work, let's say a male, he's a strong leader, he gets work done, he's
Mm.
respected.
Yeah.
Whereas if you see a woman, a female boss, she also gets things done. She's a taskmaster, but what's her label? Aggressive. Why?
Bossy,
Bossy.
dominating,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and
Why all these terms for women
yeah.
when they are doing the same job, getting the same work done? Yet the man
Yeah.
is perceived as a good leader, a great
Yeah.
leader, and a woman
Yeah.
is automatically labeled. So I think
Yeah.
there's just something that there is a lot of judgment out there. And I think for women, this idea of judgment stems from conditioning from a young age.
Mm,
As children, there's lots of conditioning. So, daughters, you're told to wear pink or to play with dolls.
yeah.
And then you're taught, not to speak up to your elders, to respect.
Mm,
You're taught to conform. And you mentioned, these ingrained beliefs of how you should be as a daughter-in-law, how you should be to a mother-in-law. Why?
yeah.
You should be respectful to anyone, to any
Absolutely.
relationship. So I think this
Absolutely.
idea of speaking up to hierarchy is just very much ingrained. And I think there's a lot of fear of living up to society's standard.
Yeah.
Well, what is your own standard? Not your family, not your neighborhood, but your own standard. So,
Yeah.
how do we start allowing a safe space for people to grow at their own pace, at their own time, and to really improve? I think, when you hear the terms today, all companies have in diversity and inclusiveness. It's part of their charter. And clearly, we have made progress from centuries ago,
Hmm. Hmm.
but there's still a lot of work to be done. We
Absolutely.
still a lot of work
Absolutely.
to be done.
Absolutely. Something that strikes me about women, particularly, regardless, because I don't differentiate anymore between work and personal, because
Mm,
it's not a switch you put on and off and you go into work and you come off. Your biases, your discrimination, you carry it everywhere. It's
yeah,
regardless. Okay, right? I noticed something that, when women talk about their relationships with other women, they talk about having suffered trauma at the hands of other women. In fact,
mm,
there is a book called The Twisted Sisterhood, which is written by a British author, where she's interviewed women, and they've all
okay.
talked about. I think it's about 400 or 500 women, or 300 women, and they talk
Mm,
about how they have suffered life-altering trauma at the hands of another woman.
another woman,
But
yeah.
but at the same time, women also talk about, on the one hand, you talk about suffering trauma, but the other hand, you also point to women as your greatest supporters,
Yeah,
as your, the pillars of strength. And a lot
yeah,
of women actually acknowledge that they thrive because of the women in their life. It seems to me, because it's very paradoxical. Like, I don't get along, but I also get along. There's trauma,
yeah.
but there's
It's
also
very
support.
extremes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very
Mm,
polarized, right? So what it suggests to me is that women struggle to form very deep relationships that are safe, that are
yes,
trust based, and that are non-judgmental with each other. Why
yeah.
do you think women struggle?
It's a great question. I think you used the words a space which is non-judgmental. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we are the way our mindset is. We
Mm,
tend to be afraid of so many things. What if I fail? What if my boss doesn't like me? What if, I look like a fool? And, this, there's a fixed mindset. And there's a professor of psychology at Stanford University, Carol Dweck. And
mm,
she's coined this term fixed mindset versus growth mindset.
mm,
And a lot of the underlying beliefs come from experiences, but how do we expand our limiting beliefs
mm.
to more empowering beliefs? By being curious, by learning from each other. And I think for many women, we judge ourselves by what others think.
Yeah,
So we give our power to
yeah.
others. And I think that's really wrong. Um, we also don't ask for help
Mm,
because we don't want to come across as weak.
mm,
Yeah. And, I think when we feel guilty when we make a mistake,
mm,
and these are things at the workplace. We celebrate so much success.
mm,
But what about this idea of having a space where if someone doesn't succeed, if
mm.
someone makes a mistake, how do we help people through
Yeah, but
that?
the thing is, Paul, even at the workspace, there are two standards, and
Mm,
these standards are inside our heads. even with women. The way
Yeah.
they respond and they react and they work with men, and the way they respond and react and work with women is two very it's different.
Yeah.
And we do see quite a bit of judgment coming up between women. Like, I
Mhm.
heard so many women who have said, I don't want a female boss. Give me any boss, but not a female boss, as long as
Yeah.
it's not a female boss,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've heard these negative talk comments about women who get ahead,
Correct.
and if they have a male sponsor or a male mentor, or if they're hanging out with the guys after work for a drink, there are not very pleasant remarks made about them. There is
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah.
gossip, which doesn't happen with the men. Like when we talk
No.
about women to women, it doesn't
Yeah.
happen with the men. So
Correct.
where do you think that comes from?
Again, I think that comes from the mindset,
Mm,
that sort of belief that if a woman, like you said, uh, goes out with the men after work, there's
mm,
judgment.
yeah,
If a woman is an entrepreneur, there's judgment.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
she has a rich husband. So I
yeah,
think all of these judgment, the first question when you meet someone is what? Are you married? Do you have
yeah.
kids?
Yes,
Why? Why is that
yes,
relevant in the grand scheme of things? But again, that goes back
absolutely.
to conditioning of go to school,
Women,
go to college, get married, have kids, have a house, have a dog. Nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
Absolutely, if that's what you want. But not every woman, that is not every woman's path of happiness.
yes,
And if I can share a story,
yes,
uh,
please.
I remember a few years ago when I joined my company, someone
Mhm.
came up to me. I'd been there for about 6 months. And she said, when I first saw you, I was really intimidated by you. And I said, why? And she said, because you wear a long sleeve shirt. You come in
Yeah,
trousers and you wear a formal shirt. And I
yeah.
said, okay. And she said, but once I got to know you, you're actually quite
Mm-hmm.
nice. So
Mm-hmm.
I think just the way you appear now to me going to work is
Yeah,
being formally dressed. Now today it doesn't really matter. You can wear
yeah,
jeans. But I was quite intrigued by that, how based on my appearance,
yes,
someone felt totally different. So what we judge a book by its cover.
yeah,
We don't take time to get to know someone. And even if there is a woman at work who is perceived aggressive or successful, do we know the sacrifices she
yeah,
has made?
yeah,
Have we
yeah.
got time to know her? Because I know a lot of women who are successful and who are very assertive. Yet there is another side to them that is compassionate, that is kind, that
Extremely,
is sincere.
extremely. Yep, yep, yep. I something you when you talked about the way you were judged for the way you were dressed and
Mm,
labeled as being intimidating,
mm.
right? See,
Again,
intimidating
a
is
label.
it's a label, but it's a very
There you go.
common label that comes,
Yeah,
that gets attached to women, because I know a lot
yeah.
of people who find me intimidating, and I'd be like, okay, but I'm actually a wuss. You know that, right? Like, don't go by what I look like. But it reminds me of something, and the fact of it is, I think we as women, and all of us, regardless of which culture or where we are in the world, we are raised to be good girls, to look a
Yes,
certain way, to be
yes,
accepted.
yes.
And I think, for a lot of our the points on which we judge other women are, as you say, how do they look, how do
Yes.
they carry themselves, what is the language they're talking, what is the tone of
Yes,
their voice.
absolutely.
I remember in my career, I had people who told me, I had a boss who actually told me, it's such a good thing you don't have a child because you can work late. And I
Yeah,
thought that, but he was way out of line. He was
yeah.
way out of line to say something like that. But just that perception that, oh, she doesn't have a child, or she doesn't have a family, or she's not
Therefore, she can
married.
absolutely.
And those
But I think
comes,
this, yeah, there's comfort, and I think the same thing with women who do have children. They go on maternity leave. When they
yes,
come back to work, the assumption is, oh, they don't want too much work because they have a
yes,
child.
yes, yes,
Let the woman decide
I
what
agree.
is relevant for her. Maybe she has a setup at home. Maybe she has in-laws. Maybe she has whatever. But let her decide how she wants to run her career.
It's so interesting. All these opinions, all these judgments, all these labels, all point to one thing, that women, it points to the conditioning and the belief that society has, that
Yes.
women are of
Yes.
the men in their lives.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And
like you're
this is
meant
how
to,
you should be. Exactly.
right? And I think somewhere along the way, women internalize this to a point that we don't even
Yes.
realize when we are judging the other person on all these parameters. That how do you show up in your
Yes.
roles that serve the men and the people in your life before it serves you? I think that,
Absolutely.
right? So, what do at work, what are the common biases you have observed women professionals having towards other women?
What are the common biases? I think
Yeah,
towards, I think they're not sincere relationships
yeah.
that people have. So I think sometimes there's shallow conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's very transactional. You don't have an opportunity to have meaningful conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, women don't speak up. There's a lot of gossip, isn't there? But I think the ability to speak up and be direct, and, operating from fear. I think, women
Yeah,
operate
but
from fear a lot.
yeah, but what according to you are the biases? Like when they look at it, like when you mentioned this person who saw you and said you were intimidating.
Yeah,
Have you ever thought about the biases that are there? Like when you walk into an office and you see a woman who looks very different from you,
yeah.
what are the biases that top of the head
Well,
come?
I think
Oh,
some of the biases could be it's all right for her.
yeah.
She has an easy life. And when
Mm-hmm.
we talk about biases, I think sometimes it's very unconscious.
It is.
We don't do it intentionally, but like you
No.
said, the way we speak, the way
Mm,
we come across. Oh, it's okay for that one. Oh,
yeah.
she must have help at home. Oh, it's
Yeah.
easy for her. Why? How do you know it's easy for someone? You don't
Do you
know
know?
what people have gone through and the sacrifices someone has had to make to get to where they are.
Do you know what is the bias that really used to get my goat at work?
What's that?
The fact that they would look at somebody different from them and
Yeah,
then just say, "Oh, you know what? She is wild. She's unconventional."
yeah,
You
yeah.
you know because this is something I used to get a lot of in my career, saying,
Really?
"Oh yes, I used to," because I worked in a very conventional setup and there weren't very
Right.
many women, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so every time I would show up in a pair of jeans, or I would yell back. If a guy yelled at me, I would yell back. I would have the women
yeah.
tell me, "You shouldn't raise your voice to men. In my family, that in our place, in our department, this would not happen. This is not acceptable." And then they would take a look at me and say, "I don't know, maybe it'll be okay for you." Right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was
yeah.
connected to a perception of me, which was, "Oh, this one's unconventional. This one is not operating from within the boxes. She's way out of the boxes."
Exactly. And again, what does it mean to conform to society? Who defines those rules?
Exactly.
So
Right?
why do you have to dress a certain way? Why can't you have your own identity? And I think a lot of the time we're not taught our own values and our own identity. And I don't mean
Yeah.
identity in terms of designation at work, but
Yes.
more, who are we? Who do I want
Mm.
to show? How do I want to show up?
Mm.
Why? What are my own values? We don't know our values. We take
Mm.
values from our society, from our family, from our communities, from religion.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with those, but if they don't conform to who you are,
Yeah.
then you're not going to be truly happy, I feel.
No, I agree 200% with you. What you also point out is something very interesting, that women, I believe, tend to look at each other in terms of the power dynamics between them. I think
Yes.
there's a very automatic judgment of, are you superior to me or are you inferior to me?
Absolutely. It's either up or down. Exactly. There's nothing, you're the same.
Yeah, you're not the same. So
Yeah, you're not the same.
yeah, and I always feel that a lot of women are constantly trying to assess, how do I interact with this person? Do I interact with this person as somebody who's more powerful than me or less powerful than me?
Yeah. And, I know
What?
a lot of women. And in fact, I was
Mhm.
talking to someone today who has been very successful in her career.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Pearl, I hate networking. And I said, why?
Mm.
She said, I hate going to these do's
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know what to say. And she's quite
Yeah.
a, very interesting person. But I said, do you not like talking to people? She said, no, I love it, but I genuinely don't know what to say. And she said, I think it's also because at work you're told you have to network.
Yeah.
Men do
Yeah.
it so effortlessly. And I think
Yeah.
for women, you don't have to just network for work. You can network to meet new friends, to learn a new skill. For example, I'm part of a network which is focused on sports.
Mm-hmm.
I love going there because I get to work on my physical well being. Now, I look forward to that because that's important to me. Am I good? Am I worse than the others? It doesn't matter. But along the
Yeah.
way, if I meet people and we
Mm-hmm.
become friends, to me, that's a bonus.
Absolutely. That's very interesting because I think for generations we've had women who have been raised to be nurturers in a very
Yes.
large family setup, and power dynamics were very important there.
Yes.
You had women who were more senior to you, you were less senior. So the power dynamics varied, and we bring a lot of that into the workspaces and,
Yeah.
in fact, into life, I think, right?
I think into life, yes.
And I don't think many women think about saying, "Oh, there's somebody interesting. Let me just go make friends with her,"
Hmm.
and who knows what happens. And I think that is a mindset that many of us have to really re-engineer, if you ask me.
I think, Rick, we're very comfortable with people who think the same way
Yeah,
as oneself. But I
yeah,
think when you can get out of that bubble and
mm,
meet people who are very different from maybe
yeah,
different the way they think, different to the way they
yeah,
dress.
yeah,
And I'll share a quick story that I've always considered myself open-minded and curious, and I
mm-hmm,
love traveling,
mm-hmm,
meeting new people. I remember a few years ago seeing a movie
mm-hmm,
about transvestites in the Philippines.
mm-hmm.
And then there was a talk show after, and someone was there who was from the transvestite community. And that's when I realized, wow, we do make judgment about
So much,
people. We
so
don't
much.
understand.
Yeah.
Here was someone who, after the movie, was sharing, narrating their struggles. And I
Mm,
think, when you can even watch movies or
yeah,
documentaries, that's a powerful
yeah,
way
yeah.
to learn and to be more empathetic. You were talking at the beginning, let's
Absolutely.
show hearts. Why
Yeah,
can't we do things with more heart,
I
more
agree.
sincerity, more compassion, more kindness?
It's very interesting that you talk about, we're going a little off topic here, but I have to say this now that we're talking about this, because something that I notice and it bothers me a lot is a lot of women who think they are feminists and a lot of women who are liberal feminists draw a line at including trans women within the ambit of feminism.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a big one for labels. I don't like labels. Let me be
Again,
very honest.
labels, right? Yeah.
I don't even like the positive labels. I don't even like the word sex sisterhood. I really don't.
Mm, mm,
Right? But for me, if you say you're a feminist, then you have to show up for every woman,
yes.
and
Yes,
if
of
you don't
course.
decide whether XYZ is a woman or not, that person decides whether they are women or not.
Of course.
Right?
And that's absolute. It's individual's choice.
Absolutely. And you don't, so it's really interesting that how much, as you said, we are so biased. We sometimes don't even notice the responses that are churning inside of us when we see something that's different. But, quick question, how do you think these biases translate into behaviors that undermine other people or negate them or minimize them or even cause them trauma? We may not intend to do it, but
Mm.
because of our biases, our responses and reactions are so strong and so harsh, we end up causing harm or hurt or undermining them or actually even denying them as people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
What are
absolutely. So
what are some of the behaviors you've noticed?
I think, it's um, we don't tend to share our knowledge with people.
Mm, mm,
Or the struggles. I think
mm.
we also tend to hold back on our emotions. We don't see the
Yeah,
vulnerable side. So there's a
yeah,
facade
yeah,
that one wears.
yeah.
And we talked about this earlier. I think, speaking up when the time is right. There's a lot of backstabbing, there's a lot of speaking behind someone's back.
Absolutely,
If there is
absolutely.
something that someone has done, tell them. Tell them
Yeah,
they may not know. They may not
yeah,
have done it intentionally. But I think if you have felt hurt or upset by a comment, let that person know so that it doesn't happen again. And I think
Right.
a lot of these things, if we could do more of speaking up,
Mm,
I think things
mm.
will just be much clearer.
Yeah, I think it's also important for us to listen. You know,
Yes, yes.
I
I mean,
think
I
it's,
think listening is just one of those skills
yeah,
that is so important. So a lot of the time we listen with the intent to respond, as Stephen Covey
yes,
said, not with the intent to understand,
absolutely.
but to be in the moment,
Yeah,
to listen, to
yeah,
digest, and
yeah,
to listen and to, you don't have to agree all the time. There are different viewpoints, but
yeah.
that's how you also grow. That's how you learn.
Yeah, and you don't have to, even if you have a different viewpoint, it doesn't mean you have to demolish that person. It
Of
doesn't
course
mean
not.
that the
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
has to do what you want them to do. You can choose to have very different ways of dealing with
Mm.
it, but you can't disrespect another person,
You can't
particularly.
disrespect a human being, I think.
You
Full
cannot.
stop.
You just
Yeah,
cannot.
full stop.
That's
Yeah. Irrespective
yeah,
of gender, full stop.
absolutely. So now that we've spoken so much about the ways women struggle with each other, let's just go to the other side of the spectrum and say, what are the key ways women can support each other professionally? I mean, it doesn't even have to be with a relationship. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need to have a relationship with a woman to support her. I can
Yeah.
just see someone and support her. What, according to you, are the key ways we can support each other?
I think in any relationship, Rick, I think one needs to build and sustain trust. It's the
Hmm.
foundation of any relationship. Uh,
Hmm.
you don't have 10% trust or 80% trust.
No,
It's
you
there or
don't.
it's not.
Yeah,
And without it, you don't have a foundation. I think
absolutely.
also learning from each other. So
Hmm.
sharing success stories, but sharing failures,
Yeah,
sharing times where things were not great.
yeah,
Um, and, I think everyone wants to feel this sense of belonging,
yeah,
which allows you to be your authentic self
yeah.
and which allows you to hold on to your truth
Hmm.
and make it work for you. And,
Hmm.
Brené Brown talks about this word vulnerability. Uh,
Yes.
and how do we be vulnerable? Because it's a sign of strength and
Yeah,
no judgment, no masks.
yeah.
And I think once we are comfortable within ourselves, we
Hmm.
help other people. We can help direct them. So that's when I think if you know your passion in life,
Yeah,
then you can help others through your purpose in life.
absolutely.
And of course, widen your network. I think broaden your network, have different people from different
Yeah,
backgrounds so
yeah.
that you can understand more
Mm-hmm.
about different cultures. It's a great, great
Mm-hmm.
way to learn.
Mm-hmm. I think what you make a very important point. I think for all of us women today, it's so important for us to have trust-based networks. It's very
Totally,
important. It's
totally,
not enough
totally.
for us to have just two friends or three friends. We need
Yeah,
networks that are scaled, because it's only when we can come together and support each other wholeheartedly that we can actually
yes,
progress and
absolutely,
start occupying our space in every sense of the word, right?
totally.
But so, given all the work that you do in the area of women's leadership, how would you say women can start this process of building trust based relationships, building those networks? Can you share a couple of quick workable tips?
Sure, sure. Well, again, I think it's building trust is not a one-off event. It's a
No.
process.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Hmm.
I would also say self-awareness. So,
Yeah.
what is the best version of yourself? It's very easy to point fingers and criticize
Mm.
others.
Mm.
Point it right back at yourself. Because
Right.
what you recognize in others, probably the structure holds truth in you somewhere as well.
Yeah.
In my religion, we the philosophy is good thoughts, good words, good deeds.
Yeah.
And I think being mindful, it sounds very easy, doesn't it? Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. But to put
No.
it into practice is a hard thing. But I would say stay focused on your own timeline. Don't compare yourself to
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
I think that comparison is hard. And I would say when you talk to it, use your gut, follow your gut
Mm.
instinct.
Mm.
That is
Mm.
there to guide you.
Mm.
Be curious, be open, but follow your gut. We feel
Mm.
people.
Mm.
What does that mean for us? And like we talked about this today, feeling safe,
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
creating a space, whether it's at
Yeah.
work, whether it's at home. How do
Yeah.
we feel safe?
Yeah.
So, just to quickly, emphasize those points: self-awareness, being mindful how you're communicating, follow your gut instinct, and create a space where you can feel safe. And trust is not built overnight. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's not a one-off event.
Yeah.
And I think everything we do should be to empower ourselves, but to empower others around us so we can move forward together.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to add to it what we were talking about a little bit earlier, because although we had a structure to this, we've basically mixed up everything and talked about it.
We're
It's
not. We don't like
yeah,
structure, Rick. You
we
know
don't
that.
like. I know that. That's why I'm smiling, because I said, with Pearl, I shouldn't even give her questions. We should just get on a call because the conversation flows. But I'm going to add a couple of things that you raised earlier, which was communication, speaking up,
Yes,
and speaking up. It's not, others don't have. If others disrespect you, we need to know how to stand up for ourselves, and we
absolutely.
need to know how to communicate. I would The
Yes,
second thing that you talked about was listening. Really listen to hear and see that person. And what I really liked was the third thing that you said about seeing people and helping them belong, because
yes,
I think that's really, really important.
totally,
But
totally agree.
we are on top of the hour now, so Pearl. So I'm going to say
Oh,
thank you very much. I know you have to jump on another call, and I'm really, really grateful you squeezed in this conversation between your calls. Thank you so
no,
much.
thank you, Rick. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope it's been helpful and meaningful to the participants who are listening.